I'm Julian Cooney, and I am a professor in the Department of Classics and Religious Studies and Indigenous Studies and Africana Studies at the University of Arizona. And I'm also a researcher, and much of my work focuses on indigenous people and the rights of indigenous people, the protection of sacred sites and indigenous rights, as well as people being violated by the prison industrial complex. Today, I just want to talk briefly about the case of Douglas Chief Stankewitz, an indigenous Mono-Indian person who has been on death row now for 39 years. As is known, Chief was convicted in 1978 for the killing of a young woman, and has since that time insisted on his innocence. There have been various egregious and outrageous inconsistencies in his case after that conviction. There have been at least a few occasions when the case has been reopened, when there have been resentencing hearings. In 1993, there was a major shift in the case when they found inconsistencies, all the way through 2012 and into the present. Very importantly, in July 2016, there was a historic development when the medical doctor who testified at Chief's court case had his medical license revoked because he had lied on the witness stand in previous cases. And this is a very significant development because it was the confession to this doctor, supposedly made by Chief, allegedly made by Chief, that was used by the prosecutor's case to send Chief to death row. Chief was 18 years old at the time in the state of California when he was sentenced to death, which would be totally unconstitutional today because he was underage. There was also boy Billy Brown, who was the so-called witness in the case, a 14-year-old who has since passed away, who testified that he had seen Chief pull the trigger at the time. And it was a case of a quid pro quo situation where he testified against Chief and had his sentence mitigated at that time. He was considered one of the accomplices. Before he passed away, Billy Brown confessed that he had lied and that he had never seen Chief, confessed to the murder of Miss Beale, nor had he seen him pull the trigger. So there are egregious instances here where there's been a gross violation of justice and the persistence of criminal injustice against an indigenous person who's been there now for 39 years into his late 50s, an innocent person who has always insisted that he has never committed the crime and who is still on death row, the longest serving person on death row in the state of California and probably in the United States or even in the world. So we're calling for support for Chief's immediate release. And now with the historical development of well-known civil rights attorney Serra from San Francisco on Chief's legal team for the first time, because Chief, being from an indigenous impoverished background, had never had the funds to pay for a decent, well-resourced legal attorney who would fight his case. And now with Tony Serra taking on the case, now for the past 6 months, we are very hopeful that the truth in this very, very painful situation of an innocent person, and an indigenous person at that, being wrongfully convicted and sent to death row and having lost so many years of his prime life on death row, confined at San Quentin, that with this change, Chief will finally be vindicated and will be released so that justice is truly done. Thank you for your support of Douglas Chief Stankewitz and his freedom. Free Chief.